November 8th, 2022. A little game dropped called Sonic Frontiers. I remember playing this game on release day and I had this feeling that something was just off about this game. I just remember stopping in the middle of my playthrough and thinking, is this really it? Like, really? Is that all that this game has to offer? And I turned off the game for the night. About a year-ish later, I came back to it, along with that feeling again. And after that, I just kept playing through it on and off throughout the years, whenever it just came to mind, right? Recently, I was somewhat confident that this game was bad, and I was just going to review it as is with only 2 islands finished. However, this voice kept nagging in my head, just, come on, just play the game. Just complete the game, and at least give it a fair try. Give the devil his due. So, how was it? So basically, in this game, you have open zones that contain linear platforming challenges that, float around the map awkwardly. They just stand there extremely out of place, and they just seem to be there trying to compensate for the lack of any force pushing the player forward. So these collectibles actually push the player forward, and usually at the end of these platforming segments, you have a collectible waiting for you at the end. Along with these awkwardly floating platforming challenges, you also have these big, higher tier structures that usually at the end of those huge linear challenges, they house a Chaos Emerald at the end. So again, this seems to be a desperate attempt trying to add some type of challenge back into an empty open world. And I know that the world isn't completely empty. You have collectibles, you have map upgrades, but during my playthrough, I just ignored all of that and I just gunned towards what was fundamentally the goal of this game. Collect the memory tokens, progress character events, get the vault keys, get the Chaos Emeralds, do the supersonic fight. That is what this game fundamentally is. Now I understand it might be reductive to describe the game like that, but I feel like this game just stuffs a lot of things in this open world just to pad out for time. I've literally found myself ignoring map-filling puzzles because I could just look where I'm supposed to go with the compass. The collectathon aspect feels extremely cheap and shallow. There's nothing really threatening the player. Not even death even means anything. So it's just a slow morphine drip of progression. And I was wondering, why does this collectathon aspect feel so cheap? And I feel like the main reason why it feels so cheap is because of the lack of an invisible force pushing the player forward. There's no timers, no aggressive enemies that are trying to hunt you down, just a leisure stroll through the island. Also, I haven't paid much attention to the story, but isn't Sonic infected with cyber corruption? Or his friends are in danger of being permanently wiped from this physical plane? So you'd think that would reflect in the gameplay, right? Maybe like a time limit or anything to really get the player going, but nope, just an easygoing open world experience. But if you're sick of how boring the open world is, you can just fish with Big the Cat and use the fishing tokens to buy every important item to progress the game. And if you really just don't want to interact with the game, you can just do a 10-second cooking minigame and earn 3 fishing tokens. Now, if my math is correct, I think it would take around a half an hour to get all your vault keys if you just did the cooking meat minigame. Would people want to do that? Probably not. The minigame's just most likely meant to just push people over the edge just to get a few things. I really dislike this kind of design because it further contributes to this very mushy gameplay experience. I feel like they made this part of the game for players who just got bored of the game, and since Big the Cat sells items that progress the game, why should I interact with the open world setting? As for movement, I don't really have much to say. It feels pretty much like a modern Boost Sonic game, but if they got rid of drifting, not that there's much to do in these open areas, or any urgency to drift, or anything really remotely challenging in this game, none of the platforming sections really feel like I was tested. It doesn't really get any more challenging than switching to the correct rail at the right time. So Sonic can go into like this really weird sparkle state where he launches off of a steep incline. And oh yeah, don't think that you can jump off of that. That's not what causes it. You basically have to just boost off of the steep incline and hope it just activates. Sometimes you'll go flying in the air off of some random incline, and the next you'll just be magnetized to the ground. Now, this open zone concept that they're messing around with didn't come from nowhere. They explained in this interview that they were using Super Mario Bros. 3, or gave Super Mario Bros. 3 as an example. They wanted to basically make the world map and platformers actually explorable. So imagine if Super Mario Bros. 3's world map was explorable, and then you had all these like little levels dotted around the map. That's the basic idea of open zones. This is just my crackpot theory, but I think this is just more of a complex way of saying we're just going to do what everyone else is doing, and they just made an open world game because it would sell well rather than actually doing anything unique. Even though this is a crackpot theory, this isn't coming out of nowhere. I'm not pulling this out of my ass. This is a common trend for video games to trend towards longer play times, so they just stuff it up with whatever fluff they want to just put into the game. This isn't coming out of nowhere. There's also an entire website dedicated to seeing how long it is to beat a video game, and I wouldn't be too surprised if developers were also looking at that website and taking notes. But overall, I feel like this game's level design is lacking any real pushback due to how empty it is, and the floating linear sections only serve to support the collectathon aspect. Even cyberspace exists due to just lacking anything meaningful outside of those linear platforming challenges. While combat feels half-baked, or quite literally just transforms into another platforming challenge rather than just outsmarting the enemy. I almost forgot to talk about the cyberspace levels in this video, which I shouldn't have because they are an integral part to the progression system. Questionably integral. But in short, cyberspace levels have you do 4 tasks within a linear stage. Complete the stage under a time limit, collect the red rings, which they're placed in relatively easy spots and permanently stay with you on every retry, and finally finish the stage with a certain amount of rings. Completing a task gives you a key, but the tasks are extremely easy to complete within about 1 to 3 retries, which I'm guessing the reason why they're so short and easy, so the game can progress smoothly rather than halting your progress, or having an actual scoring system that doesn't bog down the progress of the game. However, the main problem is that some of these stages are not made with Sonic Frontiers' physics and mechanics in mind. The more obvious one is having Sonic Adventure 2's city escape levels slapped into a game that doesn't have the same rail grind interactions as Sonic Frontiers, making the stage easier as a result. So you can't just go plugging in different stages into a game and just expecting it to work. This applies to all stages, even the ones that are just modern boost stages dropped into the game. They still don't work because those previous stages were built with drifting in mind, along with the scoring system and the special interactions you have with the stage from the previous game. They're all now flattened out by Sonic Frontiers' engine and design, which I can understand why because it probably cut down on a lot of dev time. I prefer original stages built with the game in mind instead of, copying and pasting stages that don't have the game in mind. As for the presentation of the cyberspace levels, the backgrounds look great and definitely convey that feeling of being trapped in a surreal digital world that did a brain scan of Sonic, and now we're replaying through his memories. The actual presentation of the stage, however, it feels very cookie cutter, like they made a bunch of all-purpose assets and now you're looking at what is those all-purpose assets being mished and mashed together to make these stages.
I'm not interested in killing. I just want to prove how bad your kicks are.
Rings in the classic Sonic game were this subtle way to add difficulty. Sure, it's easy to get hit and pick up all those rings back up, but you're playing for survival at that point. So there's a difference between playing survival and playing for score in a classic Sonic game. You lose rings, you also lose time. Scoring is a measure of how well you have been performing in a stage. Now, over time, it seems like Sonic has become less and less about scoring and more about meta progression and modernization of this game formula. So now that we're in Sonic Frontiers, what do rings mean in this new open world setting now? What do rings mean in this open zone setting now? It almost seems like scoring was an afterthought in Frontiers, but it was actually simplified on purpose. Okay, maybe it wasn't on purpose, but I'd say it was apathy towards difficulty because they already got their playtime goal through the easy fluff content that they made. Don't take it from me, Kishimoto said it himself. In previous Sonic titles, we had to gradually make the stages more difficult in order to reach an amount of playtime that would satisfy players. It is natural for level-based platformers to become more difficult as you progress. However, for Sonic games, the problem has always been that higher difficulty can get in the way of the game's sense of speed. In Sonic Frontiers, the open zone offers a lot of content already, so raising the difficulty in order to increase the playtime was no longer necessary. From start to finish, we were able to maintain a sense of speed with ideal level design for a Sonic game. It's not surprising that there is no scoring system just to keep progression going a bit more smoothly. For rings, they play more of a health bar role than anything else, so in this new gameplay style, you can max out your ring count, and once you max out your ring count, they offer this power-up form, and it basically makes Sonic go faster than usual. And I can bet that most people who discover that psi loops just give you an infinite well of rings, they just chain it. I even see my friend do it all the time as well. While on the topic of psi loop, this move is broken. Not only it's an infinite well of rings that further ruin the value of rings in general, you can just randomly get an important collectible out of this move. It is random, however, but it just feels self-defeating. Like, what's the point in this game if I can just psi loop everything into existence? What's the point in platforming when I can just psi loop? I know it's the same thing with the cooking meat minigame and the Big the Cat fishing. It's boring, but it's just there to push people over the edge. But like, what's the point? It just defeats the value in exploring a level. I will give the game some credit. It is interesting that struggling players can upgrade their ring count and possibly lose some access to the power-up form in exchange for more hits. That would have been at least worth something if the game was a bit more difficult, or forced you into combat scenarios outside of supersonic fights, or actually had any engaging action gameplay at all. But now, rings are just a generic health bar or an item on a list within the cyberspace to cross out just to fit within its more modern take due to the lack of any scoring, and stripping any identity that Sonic even had at all. So there is combat in this game, a whole skill tree and experience points to spend on that skill tree. But these moves seem really disconnected from the actual platforming, and then sometimes you can just kind of screw yourself over if you accidentally like press RT or a face button that's mapped to like a certain move. I sometimes do that, but now I actually thought it was my fault, but the input for the special move is way too lenient. I would press RT to boost, let go of RT, then press A to jump, but instead of jumping, I would get the special move instead. But most of the time, combat is just a very binary, you just wail on them a bunch of times, activate your Phantom Rush, do a bunch of damage as much as possible with the allotted time you're given to kill the enemy with. That's if said enemy is actually a platforming challenge and not an actual combat encounter. And I really wish there was more to this combat, like maybe you get to face all the little guys and then one big guy, or at least some sort of interesting combination of two big guys and one huge guy or something like that. I feel like these enemies weren't really meant to be faced together, they were just only meant to be faced one-on-one, and it's really disappointing because it would lead to a lot of interesting scenarios that would have actually kind of tested the system. The only enemies I can see synergizing with each other pretty well is Ninja, Tower, and the common Mooks. They're also the most common enemies to be reused and reskinned.
It's time for the moment you've been waiting for! Duh. Preparing.
It sucks. The supersonic fights are obviously the highlight of the game, but the spectacle went away when I messed around with the Giganto fight, and I only realized that the supersonic fights are just glorified punching bags with only one solution. It looks cool, but there's nothing much going on underneath the hood. I'm going to acknowledge that it is very hard to make a boss fight where there's this big AI boss monster, and it has to hit this small moving target that's controlled by the player. That's extremely hard to problem solve out and figure out how to design around in a 3D space, because you can't judge the distance between Sonic and the hitbox, so they have to have this parry mechanic, but this parry feels more like a cheap solution, especially since Sonic is too overpowered and has a solution for basically everything. Enemy is about to attack, parry. Not doing enough damage, spam stomp. Man, if Sega made a game that didn't have a parry and you couldn't control the camera, but you had a very fine level control over the character with a whole button dedicated to that. Oh, if only Sega made a whole series of solutions to this problem of a small flying character and a big off boss throwing out attacks. With zero slider intervention.
Have her suck my dick in my dick in her bag.
It's probably unfair for me to compare Spikeout to Sonic Frontiers, but I think it would be really interesting to give supersonic... I don't know the terminology for this type of movement, but it's not 6-axis, and it doesn't let you rotate, but it still lets you move freely on the XYZ axis. You just have no degree of rotation at all. You're just moving statically up, down, left, right, XYZ axis. And have a shift button that changes its movement so you can dodge out all these attacks and weave through a bunch of these like attack patterns, or maybe have some bullet hell patterns, or at least have some attacks that force you to respect the boss in some way. However, if you do play without the parry, Giganto does have these huge hitbox balls you have to be wary of if you're going to be boosting up into his face. But most of the time you're going to be glued to his face because there isn't any other enemies coming to gank you, or loose projectiles going to hit you. With all this movement inertia, it would probably be impossible to dodge all of these lasers with how Sonic is designed. But instead, we get these boring QTEs. I do like Ashura's Wrath, but I feel like that game executed it way better. As for Wyvern, Knight, and the final boss, Supreme, Calamitous, I don't know. It's still a binary approach. Do the gimmick, win the fight. That's pretty much it. Each boss has a unique gimmick, but the gimmicks can be easily solved by parrying. And the main reason why I stopped was that I just wasn't having fun at all. These bosses are not fun. They're just jingling keys. That's pretty much it. Unlike something in Spikeout where I recently had this moment where I finally beat the first boss. I actually felt like I did something really cool. Unlike Sonic Frontiers, where it feels like I'm just kind of tearing up tissue paper, due to how easy the parrying mechanic is. You could still make the combat really interesting if you took out the parry and actually forced the player to dodge incoming attacks. Not having a parry will encourage the player to position themselves in such a way where they can dodge the attack, then go in as quick as possible. But overall, I can describe every fight going like this. Either they're a platforming challenge that transforms into some sort of gimmicky fight, or a platform challenge that transforms into a punching bag, or just a punching bag, and there's only one solution to these fights. It's all good, man. Shmup section's made up for the combat. It's so fucking cool. Wow, I enjoy Ikaruga. Holy... Oh yeah, this is to another story. That's the extra dumb content. Like, I don't want to finish because I'm not planning on doing another story. Like maybe on like maybe if I'm genuinely really bored. But as of now, no. I don't feel it. I'm not feeling it. And that's it. This is where I end my game, or rather my playthrough. I've beaten this game. I've tried, setting the deceleration to 0. Okay, so I heard about this thing called jump deceleration, jump deceleration. And I'm wondering how much that actually changes the game. I have a bad feeling about this. Okay, set jump deceleration to like. This doesn't really change my thoughts on. Oh, I just went like flying. It's certainly faster, but it's not gonna like damage has already been done. Nothing much to report there other than the damage has already been done. Game sucks. I did a few battle rush challenges, and it only put a spotlight on how binary and prescriptive the combat is. I modded the game to at least fight the bosses, and again, it just proved that I was right about this game. It's just a very boring collectathon. I know I'm missing out on extreme difficulty and the whole, 17 hours of collectathon and grinding, but this time you get to do it with Tails, Knuckles, and Amy. Yay! Isn't that fun? Isn't the base game so fun? No, thank you. I think I've been put into a deep sleep by this game, and I think I should be waking up by now. And I have seen the skill ceiling with like speedruns, or glitchless speedruns, and it kind of proved how flawed the game is. So why did I make this video? It might be flawed, I'm gonna kind of accept it for what it is. I'm probably gonna look back at it and cringe. But I made this video because I just don't like this game. I was so confident that this game was bad, and I thought, okay, I'll slow down, I'll give it a chance. And I felt like my generosity was wasted. And now I'm sick and tired of everybody calling this peak. Oh my god, this game's so good, it's so peak. And I'm not saying you can't enjoy the game, obviously. And if you do, I highly recommend looking deep into the game and understanding why you like these certain elements. But now, I am tired. I am tired of this game. I feel like it's extremely shallow. And some questions pop into my head like, does it have a right to be criticized as shallow when it's trying to be shallow for everyone? Can shallow games be considered masterpieces? And I'm not really going to answer those questions. This video's long enough as is. But overall, it feels like Sonic Frontiers is a game that is constantly tripping over itself. You have this open world... open zone levels, yet the game has mechanics that discourage players from exploring that zone, and said zones being very lifeless. There are landmarks to keep track of the area, but most of them seem pretty bland, out of place, and unremarkable. However, I did find it more fun to play without the map when I got to the third island, because that actually forced me to take mental notes of the area and understand where I should be going. However, I think the challenges should be carved into the terrain and not have the terrain be a canvas for the random floating platforms. Oh yeah, and those linear platforming sections feel very lackluster. There's only a few platforming sections that actually felt pretty decent to actually clear, but other than that, most of them were automated or didn't even have any platforming in general. It was just switch to the correct grind rail, and that was pretty much it. Actually, imagine if Sonic Frontiers took place in a city and you had to make deliveries and race rivals across the highway, and you had to like make sure you didn't bump into the rail guards. You know what? I understand that I'm talking out of my but this just sounds better than whatever the Frontiers was. Along with combat that can be easily ignored, and on higher levels of play, they just straight up ignore it. Oh yeah, and I can't forget about the sliders. If a game has sliders, you might as well be talking about a completely different game if someone else messed with those sliders, because that can change how you even interact with the game at all. And this isn't just limited to Sonic Frontiers, but any game that has that kind of freedom over changing the game design is detrimental to the game's identity. Basically, you are now offloading the balancing to the players instead of making easy, normal, hard difficulties that are actually tested by the devs. As of now, we're going to be seeing more Frontiers. We're going to be seeing a sequel and a definitive edition, supposedly. So, I hope for the best, and I'm expecting a whole lot more grind. I said what I needed to say about Sonic Frontiers. I really just wanted to throw my thoughts out on this game because it was just jumping around my head and I just needed to get it out somewhere. I think it's a pretty good time to be alive for video games. We basically have every video game at our fingertips, whether it's through emulation, ports, or decompilations. And I think it's important to go beyond the consensus in search of something greater. I feel like there's this platformer safe space, and all they pretty much do is worship the same IPs over and over again. And we kind of see this reflected in what games are made now. I mean, look at Bubsy 4D. And Atari is totally not trying to pan for gold in the indie market because of their failed attempts. The best we can do is look back to the past, not just for blind nostalgic rides like Bubsy 4D or Sonic Frontiers, but precise reasons as to why these games were good, and bring that knowledge to the people who need it. And that's all I really have to say. Thank you for watching.